The first one is simply to interpret this inscription that you can see in front of you. I'd like to share with you what I think it means. And my second objective is to argue that what we can see in the inscription is in fact an instance, an example of what I would call a diagon. A diagon is a chevron that has some specific, highly specific characteristics that I would like to discuss with you. Hopefully this will enable us to understand what the inscription is about. So basically it's about revealing, deciphering the meaning of the inscription. The inscription itself is called Bokrokot. The technical term is Book 2.1. Beginning from now I will be using the term Book 2.1 as a technical label for the inscription. Well, so these are my two objectives. Beginning from now, I'll be using the term diagon. It's a coined word, and by a diagon I mean a chevron. It's an inscription having the form of a chevron with an apex, with a peak at the top of it, and the apex represents a rhyme, literally a poetical rhyme. Okay? But within the two lines, we will be able to discover some poetic devices. That's why I'm talking about the poesis, including what we call ambigram, when word is the mirrored image of the other word, as you can see in my example here. It uses also homonymy, as you can see in there, and it exhibits some more rhetorical poetic devices that I will be discussing with you. So this is basically what they call the diagon. We can also think about the trigon, if it has three lines, etc. So what we have here is two lines, arguably poetic in nature, meeting at the peak, and the peak is a rhyme, is a poetic rhyme. I would like, to use the example that I have just presented. In fact, just as an example, because I have 4 examples that I studied, I will be sharing with you some information about them as well. I'm using some assumptions, of course, assumptions about the history of the Amazigh language, assumptions about the Libico-Amazigh inscriptions, and assumptions about the nature and the function of philological analysis. What I would like to say, my main argument, theoretical argument, is that the analysis, well, we are able to somehow interpret those Libico-Amazigh inscriptions with the proviso that we use more than one strategy. We need to broaden the perspective of strategies. Using biscripts is not enough. We need to broaden the scope, and my argument, what I'm suggesting, is one more scope, which is, considering the poetic aspects of the inscriptions, for interpretations, for philological interpretations. Well, let me just move straightforwardly to the inscription that I will be discussing with you, which is this one. I will be using 3 models or 3 lists. I will be using the models of the so-called Saharian model. This script, which is transitional between Libic and Tuareg, that was discussed by many scholars, such as, let me just give you 1 or 2 examples of them. Well, I have some examples in here, like in Foucault, 1920, Martin, 1936, Mauni, 1954, and others. So I will be using the list, I will be using the transitional model. In addition to this, I will be using the 3 famous stages or phases of picture and Roderick, the archaic, the classic, and the transitional. I will also be looking at the Tuareg localisms, for phonetic interpretations, because I'm talking here about 2 types of interpretation: phonetic interpretation, which is specifying the phonetic content of the grapheme, plus the S interpretation or semantic interpretation, which is specifying the meaning of the words, the segments, phrases, sentences, and so on and so forth. So straightforwardly to the example that I will be discussing, here it is. It was documented by Cash, in 2002, and then by Sponti, Al-Majidi, and Nami in 2003. So it's well documented for all, technical information. You can find them in the references I'm including in my presentation. Now, this is the schematization done by Pitcher and Roderick for this inscription, and this is the schematization suggested by Sponti et al., and this is the schematization suggested by Cash. Okay? For, convenience, I will be using the one that was suggested by Pitcher and Roderick, and the most important thing is to reach some semantic consistency in our interpretation of it. So let's start then. So this is my idealization of the graphic schematization. This is it. And I will go grapheme by grapheme. The first one is the graphic version of this grapheme that looks like a capital M in Latin, which is pronounced in the archaic, classic, and transitional lists of Pitcher and Roderick as sh. Okay, the same phonetic specification is suggested by the Saharian mod as well. The second one is ge, so it's uniformly ge in all the lists that I've been considering. Thank you. Yes, sure. The next one is he. Again, I'm using the same models, I don't need to repeat myself, it's the same list that I'm using. The next one is the non-emphatic one. The next one is ra, uniformly so in the list that I'm using. The next one is then, the next one is ra, I'm not repeating myself. The next one is curious because it's either he or he. But if it is he, then we already have another he. I'm using a principle suggested by Pitcher and Roderick, which is that it's impossible to assign two distinct phonetic values, one phonetic value to two distinct graphemes. It's impossible. So there is something very interesting about the three dots, and my suggestion is that it should be interpreted as qa, the geminated qa. I have a reason for that. In the Amazigh language and dialects, there is a phonological rule that converts the he when it is reduplicated followed by the vowel into qa, and here are some examples. For example, in the Tabi Amazigh, they would say something like sarrahwat, which means to irritate, but when they mean blossom, they would say warraqat, so it becomes qat because it's geminated and followed by a vowel. One more example from Tashhid this time, we would say something like tizahwa, and but tazqa for the room. One is plural, the other one is singular. Again, it's the same rule. It has become qat whenever it's geminated followed by a vowel. Many examples of this type convinced me that in fact the three dots is qat. It's a geminated qat. This one I would interpret as the emphatic one, using the same lists that I'm using as a part of my data. Now, the semantic interpretation I'm suggesting is the following, because this is sh followed by ge. I'm suggesting that this is a segment, and there is a higher level of semantic consistency when we fit it in the context. So I interpret it as sig or isig. We have a rule that would paralyze the se into sh whenever it's followed by e, so it should be pronounced like sh. So isig, it means an ox. Yes, I'm taking into consideration time. I think how much time I still have.
You are finished, but I give you a few minutes.
Can you give me 5 minutes more?
Max.
Maximum, okay? So this is shik. This is ashik. Ashik is my interpretation of it. This is his, which means to plow, in my cross-dialectal data. And this is urti or urtu, which means a field in my cross-dialectal data. So we should read the whole thing in the following way, because I'm being rushed, so I will have to give you my conclusion. My conclusion from this phonological analysis is that what we have here is something like this. It is my final interpretation. Here it is. It goes like this. Ashig irzo urti irqa. Asha iga irti izqa. So it runs very well, and the literal meaning of it is the following. The ox plowed the orchard, but then got killed, got grilled, raised, while the greyhound did no more than watch him with his eyes, but set up his tent or house, that is to say, he survived. So here we have a comparison between two animals, one animal which is working and working, but ill rewarded, and the other animal is just watching around, but is drilled, is raised. My conclusion is the following. This inscription shows all the characteristics of a Dagon, namely that it's a chevron with a rhymed peak. Number two, it shows rhetorical devices, namely a rhyme which is up, and it shows an ambigram which is te, ra, and ra, te. It shows a near homonymy, a shiga, esh, iga, so it's a homonymy. It shows a metaphor or a zoomorphism. Persons are represented as an ox and then as a greyhound. And it has a semantic or pragmatic value as well. Probably this is a proverb which was used in an agricultural context. I have other examples and I will just show them to you. Here is one example that of the Dagon that I studied. Maybe in the debating time I can talk about that. Here is the second one that I studied. Here is a fourth one that I studied, but this one is not a Dagon, but rather a trigon, because it has 3 lines. It has a highly specific meaning, and I analyzed it in some detail. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.